Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the House Rules and Executive Nominations Committee. Thank you all for coming here today. My name is Marvin Holmes, and I am the Vice Chair of this committee. And today we're going to start with bill hearings, and then we have joint resolutions, referrals, and recess appointments. And for each of the bills that we're going to be hearing, it's going to be just like the normal scenarios in our committees, where the sponsors of the bills will be able to present their bills with no time limit on them. However, the witnesses will have a two-minute time limit on them. And there will be a timer inside of the screen that indicates how much time you have left for the witnesses to present their testimony. And obviously, this is a public scenario, so it'll be on YouTube for all the members, the citizens to view on YouTube. And with that, we're going to start with HB 36. And I don't see Vaughn Stewart here. Is there someone presenting on his behalf? Therefore, we will go next on to Boucher. How are you, sir?
I am absolutely wonderful on this gorgeous day. I don't know about you all, but I'd rather be fishing or riding my Harley right now. But I'll take being here with you all. For the record, I am Delegate Chris Boucher, representing District 5, Carroll, and Frederick counties. Thank you very much, Chairman Holmes, and the most honorable members of the entire House, the Rules Committee. This bill is very simple. It deals with political science. It's about conforming the Maryland State Senate to align with a mechanism in the United States Senate, and that's having staggered elections every 2 years. It's called the Membership Election and Senators and Eligibility Bill 206 HB. When the Supreme Court created one man, one vote in the 1960s, it eliminated the check valve of the Senate upon the House, which has more passion when it passes bills. The purpose of a bicameral legislature with the Senate is to have more reflection about the bills that come through. And by staggering the elections every 2 years, we would have a different type of mechanism and deliberation of the Maryland State Senate to reflect the one that takes place in the United States Senate. The United States Senate elects its senators every 2 years, 1/3, since they have 6 years rolling terms. That is reflective upon how they deliberate. So we'd have 24 gubernatorial senators and 24 presidential senators. Since there's two mechanisms for the Senate, one to deliberate over the House, one is being elected equally across all the states. Since the Supreme Court passed that law, new laws, we cannot elect senators by county, so that option is not available to us. The only option we have available to us is to stagger the elections. So this bill would increase the membership of the state Senate from 47 to 48 and increase the membership of this wonderful body from 141 to 144, and I'm sure you guys will like that, especially since we expanded out the amount of committees we have. It's a very simple, basic bill. It's not a partisan bill. This bill is strictly about good political science, and since this is my last session, this is my last chance to get this through, and I hope that my colleagues recognize the value of this bill. This is not politics. This is about sound political science. So I hope that you give us a favorable vote and get this out on the floor. Allow us a debate on this. I am willing to take some questions.
Any questions from the committee members? Delegate Barnes.
I have a question. I'm thinking about single subject rule. So it seems like it'd be appropriate, I don't know if it'd be a friendly amendment to just eliminate the Senate altogether. Do you think that would be, might run it more smoothly around here? I don't know.
That's wonderful, Ben. I like your comment.
Is that a motion, Delegate Barnes? Moving right along, any additional questions for the sponsor of the bill? Seeing none, thank you so very much. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to go ride my bike or go fishing. Y'all have an absolutely wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Take care now. And next, we're going to go to Delegate Fisher here. There you go. Thank you so very much. And State your name and
Thank you and good
thank you very
afternoon.
much.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair and members of the esteemed Rules and Executive Nominations Committee. For the record, I am Maxwell Middleton, the Chief of Staff to Delegate Mark Fisher, here to introduce House Bill 785, titled Convention Amendments Convention called under Article 5 of the United States Constitution, Delegation to the Convention. I will now turn it over to Delegate Fisher's lead panelist to present the bill in its entirety. This is Mr. Steve Patton, who is the Associate Regional Director of the Convention of States Action Organization.
Hello, excuse me. Good afternoon. Yes, we are in the afternoon. Sorry, long day already. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for having me. I would hope that I look slightly familiar to this committee. I've been representing Convention of States in front of this committee since 2017. I've testified every year. In case you were unaware, this legislation, HB 785, is different than what I've been in front of this committee testifying in approval of prior. So Convention of States is a function of Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, where states can actually initiate a amendments convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution. I want to be clear, that is not what this bill is asking. We have not filed what we call the main COS resolution. So we are not asking you for a favorable vote on asking Maryland to join a convention of states to reach that 34 state threshold where the convention would be called. What this bill does, it has to do with what we call faithful commissioner legislation. It offers you all the opportunity to set the guidelines for the commissioners that you will select, the General Assembly of Maryland will select and send to represent Maryland at an Article 5 Convention of the States. All of the states will be invited. That's an important point. It takes 34 states to initiate Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to have the Congress call the Constitution for it to happen. This bill merely addresses how Maryland will choose their delegates to represent the state of Maryland. So what does it do specifically? Defined authority of the delegates that will represent Maryland, compensation standards, binding subject matter limits, reporting requirements, and a removal mechanism if a commissioner exceeds the scope set by the General Assembly. In short, HB 785 ensures Maryland retains full legislative control over the delegation, excuse me, at an Article 5 Convention of the States. In addition, this does not only adhere to the resolution that the organization that I am affiliated with, Article 5 resolution. There are numerous Article 5 resolutions across the country that are calling for an Article 5 convention under different subjects and single subject matter across the country. I think that's an important thing to remember because this really just applies to the General Assembly assigning the rules and guidelines for the delegates that would represent Maryland at an Article 5, any Article 5 convention once it's called and initiated. What does this bill not do? It does not call a convention. It does not expand the scope of the call of the convention. It does not endorse any specific amendment. It simply ensures that when Maryland participates in a constitutional dialogue, it does so with clarity, discipline, and accountability. I would be happy to answer any questions anyone might have, and thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And what is your name again, sir?
Steve Patton, and I reside in District 42C in Carroll County.
Okay. I just didn't see you on the list here. Any questions for this panel? Delegate Guyton. Oh, I'm sorry, Shalaga. I'm seeing the light. I thought the light was there. I'm so sorry. Delegate Shalaga.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So if or when a convention is called and the state of Maryland has not passed guidelines, what would happen? Would we have to have a special session to do that?
Yes, you would be hurrying, hustling to put together how are you going to decide who represents you, how many delegates are you going to send, how are they going to be compensated, what are the qualifications for those delegates. The General Assembly would need to get together and address it pretty quickly once the convention is called. This basically puts in front of you the opportunity to set those guidelines now so that you will be prepared when it happens. And I do believe it's no longer an if, it's a when at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the panel? Seeing none, we do appreciate you coming here to testify on behalf of this bill. And with that, we will go into our next bill.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And I see Delegate Hornberger back there. Thank you so very much. Bring your panel on up. And
Okay.
how are you, sir?
Doing well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members for coming in on a Monday and hearing these very important bills. For the record, Delegate Kevin Hornberger here on behalf of HB 979, State Constitutional Convention, question on ballot, passage of majority of votes cast. Now, why is this every 20-year issue so important, and why do we need to amend it? Well, imagine you are a delegate. You are running on the ballot. You're not at the top of the ballot. We have either the president or the governor at the top of the ballot. And as we all know, as we go down that ballot, sometimes voters drop off. We call this the undervote. The way that Maryland records votes for this convention that's outlined in Article 14, Section 2 of our Constitution, is that if there is a undervote for the convention, that counts as a no vote. So imagine if all of those folks that did not vote in your delegate race counted as a no vote. It'd be very difficult to get elected, wouldn't it? But for this particular question, which only comes up every 20 years, that is how the undervote is counted, as a no vote. So what does this bill do? This bill changes that to where it's a plurality of votes cast for the ballot question. Very simple change, but very impactful. How would have this changed the last time that we had a constitutional convention? Well, that was in 2010. I would venture to say that many of the members here weren't in office in 2010, at least at the delegate level. And the spread on folks that did not go down ballot, in other words, the undervote for the state, was roughly 216,000 folks that did not vote for the convention. All of those votes counted as a no. And as a result, what I believe the voters were misled, and we did not have a constitutional convention. Had it been a plurality of votes cast, we would have had a different outcome. So I believe this is a matter of transparency. I have some panelists here that will speak to the bill. Love to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the committee and the chair and the vice chair for the opportunity to testify on this. My name is Andy Ellis, and I'm a Green Party candidate for governor. Back in the summer, I had a new team member join, and he was very excited about a Maryland Constitutional Convention. So I started digging into it, and what I found was very interesting. Currently, there are two ways to send a Maryland constitutional amendment to the voters. One is to have this body pass an amendment. The other is a constitutional convention under Article 14, Section 2, which lays out that every 20 years, the voters shall be asked if they want to call a constitutional convention. The convention is called if a majority of voters at such election shall vote for a convention. This is interpreted to require a majority of all individuals who show up to vote in that election, regardless of whether they vote on the convention question. This is a higher bar than any other constitutional dictated question that is put in front of voters, and the 2010 referendum that Delegate Hornberger described explains the problem. If you want to see the problem, go to the State Board of Elections website for the 2010 election and look at it. You will see that a majority, or that more voters voted yes on the question than voted no on the question, but the question still failed because the 217,000 votes that didn't count for it were part of the voters who voted in the election, not the voters who voted on the question. It's a really wonky sort of numbers question, but I encourage people to go look at the State Board of Elections 2010 question results on this, and you'll see the problem. And so if that math is confusing to you, that explains why we need this bill. Imagine trying to explain this to a voter who voted, yes, I want a constitutional convention. And then they look and they see that more people voted for it than voted against it, but we still didn't have a constitutional convention. That type of thing undermines confidence in elections, undermines confidence in votes, and is confusing to people who aren't focused on it all the time, much less folks who are. So for these reasons, for clarity and to preserve the will of the voters, I urge a favorable report on HB 979.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Holmes and members of the committee. My name is Lee Bradshaw. I'm with the Maryland Forward Party. We support HB 979 because it aligns the results of questions on whether to have a state constitutional convention with a reasonable expectation of voters and with the majority of other states with the constitutional structures similar to Maryland's. Under current law, which this bill 979 seeks to correct, voters who do not participate in the question of a constitutional convention are treated as de facto no votes, and that's been pretty well understood so far. But that treatment does not necessarily reflect the voter's actual preference or expectation. It is well documented that some voters simply do not complete full ballots, but instead only vote for top-line races. According to one survey on the issue, 80% of these roll-off voters said they did not vote their entire ballot because they did not feel they understood enough about the down-ballot races to vote. In other words, these voters had no position at all on the questions and races that they declined to vote for. Counting these roll-off votes as abstentions rather than as no votes better reflects the actual preference and reasonable expectations of those voters. HB 979 also aligns Maryland with the sister states. According to the most recent data available from the Council of State Governments, of the 14 states that have periodic requirements for constitutional convention ballot questions, Maryland is one of only 2 states that considers the vote totals of all citizens voting in the election. The remaining 12 states all consider only the number of votes on the proposal itself, as Maryland would under HB 979. There's no reason for Maryland to be in the minority on this issue, and we urge the committee to provide a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to take questions now for from the committee. Delegate Pippy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I should know this, maybe I shouldn't, I'm not sure, but does it say somewhere explicitly that for a constitutional question that an undervote shall be counted as a no?
It does not.
Okay. Have you, I've always had an issue with these types of questions, you know, like this question like about, it's like, do you like firefighters? And then they're like, yeah, but then like it doesn't explain what the bill does.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So have you thought about requiring, like a bill requiring language, you know, to put on the ballot saying, if you do not vote on this question, it will be counted as a no vote?
So,
You know, so more of a disclosure. I'm just wondering if that's maybe a lighter lift.
so there is already guidance in state law on ballot questions. However, it's a little ambiguous.
Yeah, I don't remember ever seeing that phrase.
Yep. And it's more directly on what the issue does or doesn't do, not the validity of your vote,
Right.
if that makes sense. Because this is the only ballot question that has this numerical scheme built in.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
But great question, thank you.
Any additional questions for the sponsor or the panel? Seeing none, we thank you for your presenting this to us today.
Thank you, everyone.
And that concludes the hearing on HB 979. We have one additional bill hearing. We're waiting for Delegate Stewart to arrive. And while we're waiting for Delegate Stewart to arrive, we will now go to joint resolution HJ9. I see Delegate Acevera is here, who will take this next, and then go back to the bill hearings once the other delegate arrives. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Holmes. Members of the Rules and Executive Nominations Committee. For the record, Delegate Acevero here to present House Joint Resolution 9 that condemns acts of genocide, violence against civilians, as well as violations of international humanitarian human rights laws. The Maryland General Assembly has previously spoken against mass violence abroad, including through resolutions affirming the protections of civilians and respect for international law. In fact, I was proud to vote for one such resolution following the horrific but also illegal invasion of Ukraine that many of us saw and rightly condemned. This resolution is consistent with the actions that we've taken as a General Assembly to condemn illegal acts, whether it's on invasion, aggression, civilian deaths, but also using war as an excuse to inflict collective punishment on a particular population. And so consistent with that, we've seen in other parts of the world that there are acts of not just genocide, but violations of international humanitarian law, particularly in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where decades of violence fueled by armed groups that are supported by U.S. multinational corporations, that has resulted in the deaths of millions of Congolese, widespread sexual violence, forced displacement, and continued instability. And we know that there is a history of colonialism when we talk particularly about the DRC and the role of external actors, to include our own government, in destabilizing not just the DRC, but other countries that it deems as inconsistent or out of line with U.S. foreign policy of that day. Recently in Gaza, we've also seen military operations by the Israeli government that have resulted in catastrophic civilian harm, including the deaths of over 70,000 Palestinians, widespread destruction of homes, hospitals, schools, and critical infrastructure, as well as the displacement of a vast majority of Palestinians. As well as in Sudan, we are all horrified by the armed conflict by military factions that are supported by the UAE, another ally of the United States, that oftentimes has acted whenever the US government has told it to do so. And therefore, the US government has not just a role, but influence over the UAE and its role in perpetuating the armed conflict, ethnic violence, famine conditions, and the displacement of millions of Sudanese, with credible reports of atrocities amounting to war crimes and crimes against humanity, not just in Darfur, but certainly other parts of Sudan. These crises disproportionately impact women, children, the elderly, and vulnerable ethnic and religious minorities. House Joint Resolution recognizes that silence in the face of genocide that undermines not just who we are as a state, but also global norms against war crimes, and it erodes the moral authority of democratic institutions that exist, whether it be the United Nations or the International Court of Justice, both of which on several occasions have ruled on these acts of genocide in the three regions that I just mentioned, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Gaza, and Sudan. Maryland is home to a diverse community with deep personal, cultural, and familial ties to the DRC, to Gaza, and Sudan. Many Maryland residents are directly affected by suffering occurring in these regions, and they look to us not for indifference, but for moral clarity and solidarity. House Joint Resolution 9 calls for immediate and sustained cessation of hostilities where necessary to protect civilians, and accountability mechanisms for violations of international law. It also urges the government of the United States to use its diplomatic, economic, and political influence to prevent further atrocities, support humanitarian relief, and ensure that U.S. foreign assistance remains consistent with American as well as international law. Ultimately, House Joint Resolution 9 is about giving not just our words given it action and given it life in the form of a resolution, but it is also about a profound commitment that every civilian life holds equal worth, and that dignity, justice, and accountability must remain at the center of all of our shared humanity. And so it is for these reasons I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on House Joint Resolution 9 that not just condemns acts of genocide, but ensure that we are upholding our values and our laws as a state and our role on the international stage. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions for the sponsor? And if not, we will now go on to the witnesses who have listed in favor. And we'll start with Syed Jamal.
Respected Vice Chair Holmes and members of the committee. My name is Syed Jamal. I'm a resident of Maryland District 44B. I'm here to testify in strong favor of House Joint Resolution 9, which Delegate Acevedo presented, which condemns violence against civilians and calls attention to mass atrocities in Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. This resolution is important because it affirms a fundamental moral principle, the value of every human life. The loss of innocent life anywhere is a loss for all of humanity. Across faith traditions and ethical systems, the protection of innocent life is a foundational responsibility. The Quran, which is the central scripture of Islam, commands people to stand firmly for justice, even when doing so could mean standing up against your closest friends and allies. For example, in chapter 4, verse 135, it says, "Stand firm for justice as witnesses for God, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or close relatives." The story of Moses, peace be upon him, narrated in both the Quran and biblical texts, confronting the tyranny of Pharaoh, reminds us that standing against injustice is a moral duty. House Joint Resolution 9 reflects these principles. It affirms that civilian lives are not conditional, that atrocities must never be ignored, and that justice and human dignity should guide our public conscience. Maryland is home to communities with deep ties to the regions mentioned in this resolution. For many families here, these crises are not distant geopolitical events. They are deeply personal human tragedies. Supporting this resolution sends an important message that we reject the normalization of mass suffering and that we stand for the protection of civilians and the dignity of every human being. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HJ9.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call a couple of people up to the witness stand right now. I'm going to call up Shafiqul Mushana and HRU Haju. Go ahead, proceed. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Huri Hadgu. I'm a resident of District 13. I support this resolution. Since the Nazi Holocaust, the words "never again" have been spoken as though they represent a universal moral commitment, but too often "never again" has functioned as a rhetoric rather than principle. It has not been universally applied, and especially when it applies to poor, black, colonized, displaced, or politically inconvenient demographic. This is why this resolution matters. It rejects the idea that some civilian lives are worthy of grief, urgency, and protection, while others are met with delay, euphemism, and silence. The resolution itself affirms that the protection of civilian life and accountability under international law must be applied without exception or selectivity. I think this resolution is also forward-looking. Because of our silence for the past two and a half years, we've been silent during a live stream genocide. And as a result of that, apartheid Israel and the U.S. have initiated another illegal war in Iran. And the first day of this war led to the death of 170 innocent girls using our own weapons, Tomahawk weapons. And so what we say about atrocities matters, and it's important that we speak up because the atrocities don't, we don't see any signs that these atrocities are going to be abated. So I urge a favorable vote on this resolution.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for your testimony. I'm now going to call up to the witness table Khadija Abdullah and Sabhi Rahman. Thank you so much for being here, and state your name and you can begin your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Khadija. Today I'm speaking on behalf of American Muslims for Palestine in the DMV. We are a Muslim-led national organization seeking to promote Muslim advocacy for the liberation of Palestine. I'm testifying in strong support of this resolution. As Muslims in America, we witness the exceptions attached to our rights. Everyone's life is valued except the Muslims and Arabs halfway across the world that are collateral damage in the U.S.'s military operations, evident just this week in the unjustified, imperialist military incursions of the U.S. and Israel into Iran and Lebanon. Nowhere is the notion of American exceptionalism and imperialism more evident than in Palestine. 2 years ago, we gave the benefit of the doubt that our elected officials don't really know the brutality Palestinians have been facing for almost a century, but nobody can plead ignorance now. The truth is more than accessible and evident in the brave journalism coming out of Gaza. And the past 2 years alone, the Zionist entity has killed over 100,000 people, internally displaced over 2 million, indiscriminately and intentionally bombed civilian infrastructure, facilitated a manufactured starvation, and continuously violated their own terms of their illegitimate ceasefire. Despite these clear crimes against humanity, Maryland has sent over $370 million in weapons to Israel. Maryland PD and ICE target and perpetuate systemic racism of Black and brown communities, thanks in part to tactics learned in their training by the IOF. The MIDC supports institutions tied to the Israel's military-industrial complex, forcing us to subsidize an apartheid state. Instead of supporting initiatives in line with the state's own proposed values, the state chooses to remain complicit in genocide. After over 75 years of U.S.-sponsored Zionist aggression, a resolution calling for condemnation is below the bare minimum. Palestinian, Sudanese, and Congolese people deserve so much more than symbolic recognition. It's appalling that a simple condemnation of clear genocide is even a question. History has looked back and said never again. And when Palestine is liberated, this will be the case. Voting against this bill ensures genocide will be your legacy. It is undoubtedly the moral obligation of every single person in this assembly to take the first step of ensuring justice for the Palestinian people and vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you. We will now go to Melody Hassan and Hannah Zuberi. Please proceed.
You can go first. Okay. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Hannah Zuberi. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Justice for All, a US-based human rights organization working on genocide prevention and accountability. I also come with a personal story. I grew up in part of my childhood in the Sudan, and the time when my sister sent me a link to a video of bombing of our childhood house in the wonderful city of Khartoum is something that I will never, ever forget. I strongly urge you to pass House Joint Resolution 9. I live in Howard County, and my ties and my neighbors, I have so many neighbors who are impacted, family, friends, our people in our mosque who are directly impacted by this violence. Some may ask why a state legislature should speak about conflicts overseas. The answer is simple. Our federal government acts in our name with our tax dollars. When weapons, aid, and diplomatic protection are provided by the United States, the American public, through bodies like this, has both the right and the responsibility to speak. History shows that local voices matter. Our voices, your voices matter. During the anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s, state and local governments across the United States passed resolutions and divested public funds from South Africa. That pressure helped push Congress to pass the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986 over a presidential veto, accelerating the end of the apartheid. State bodies can help move federal policy. Today, civilians in Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are facing catastrophic violence. I urge you to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
I am Reverend Melody Hession-Sigmund, an assistant to my bishop for public policy, and I am here testifying on behalf of the Delaware-Maryland Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America in favor of HJ9. In May of last year, our synod passed by a vote from our congregations all over Maryland a resolution not unlike the one that this committee is considering in HJ9. We appealed to our national bishop to encourage our federal leaders that, quote, the close relationship between the United States government and the government of Israel should be used to end the genocide in Gaza. Unquote. In my written testimony, you can see the full list of asks sent from our presiding bishop to our federal officials. Additionally, the work of our partners from the Lutheran Disaster Response and Lutheran World Relief has been supported by Maryland congregations for decades, and these congregations include Sudan and Congo in their prayers every Sunday. The experience of our partners and our connection to these ministries is also outlined in my written testimony. This resolution presents this committee with an opportunity to reinforce the moral foundations of our democratic institutions here in the United States by condemning war crimes and human rights violations. Anyone who was an elected official from our local to federal governments should be concerned right now about their own capacity for becoming complicit by staying silent on these issues. Giving this bill a favorable report, this joint resolution, is not a guarantee that it will pass. However, it is a way to make this opportunity a shared one with the rest of your colleagues. We ask you to give all Maryland delegates the opportunity to reclaim values of peace and justice, both here at home and abroad, by giving this resolution a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Seeing no questions, we go to our next two persons to testify, Rahim Azam and Saad Ijaz. Apologize for mispronouncing your names. Please begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Reem Azam. I speak as a concerned American who no longer recognizes the country I grew up in. Like many, I grappled with our history, the genocide of the natives, the trafficking of the Africans. How did a nation built on noble ideals perpetrate such inhumanity? I felt grateful to exist in a timeline that rejects such evil, one in which museums, monuments, and curricula symbolize that dark chapter has closed. The Gaza genocide shattered that illusion. I watched Israeli leaders call for genocide and America respond with munition shipments every 15 hours. Among them, internationally prohibited thermal and thermobaric bombs that have vaporized thousands of Palestinians. Yet human rights advocacy has been met with repression, doxing, even violence. In the land of the free, opposing the Gaza genocide became controversial, even punishable, echoing attacks on past human rights defenders. Meanwhile, Sudan's genocide continues despite the legal obligations to prevent and punish genocide. And American firms continue to profit from war zone extraction in Congo. My focus today is Gaza, the most documented yet most denied genocide, the one we have funded to the tune of at least $22 billion. Anti-Semitism has been weaponized to silence opposition, yet Jewish groups like B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, Jewish Voice for Peace have condemned the genocide. And Gaza is not where it ends. The Greater Israel badge, worn by some soldiers, foreshadows continued ethnic cleansing, now endorsed by US officials invoking religion. Silence enables genocide. Lawmakers here had the chance 2 years ago to call for an end to Gaza's mass killing when 77 witnesses testified for HJ2, but it never even reached committee vote. HJ9 will not end the atrocities in Gaza, Sudan, and Congo, but change begins with naming evil, affirming our shared humanity, and upholding obligations. Change starts with normalization of truth. Please. I urge each of you to lead with courage and help end our nation's support for racist ideologies that stop at nothing, not even genocide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We will now go to testimony that is virtual. And I'm going to start with Grady O'Rear and Zainab Chaudhry. And these are virtual testimony.
I'm representing here on behalf of
I'm sorry, who are you?
She's with
Grady.
Okay, come on up and make sure you give me your name so I can check you on the list, please.
Hello, my name is Shafiqul Mushana. I am with the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Please proceed.
I am here today to testify in strong support of House Joint Resolution 9. This resolution is important because it affirms a fundamental moral principle. Civilian life is not conditional, and violations of international humanitarian law must be condemned wherever they occur. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the Dominican Republic of the Congo, and Sudan represent some of the most devastating examples of civilian sufferings in the world today. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, decades of violence have resulted in approximately 6 million deaths since the mid-1900s, most of them civilians killed directly or indirectly through hunger, disease, and displacement. Armed groups and government forces have repeatedly carried out attacks on civilian areas, including extrajudicial killings and widespread sexual violence, creating one of the world's largest and longest-running humanitarian crises. In Sudan, the violence that erupted in April 2023 has led to hundreds of thousands of deaths and is one of the largest displacement crises in the world. With millions forced from their homes, international observers have documented massacres, ethnic targeting, and attacks on displacement camps, including reports of more than 1,500 civilians killed in a single camp assault. In Gaza, numerous international and Israeli human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, have concluded that the scale of killing thousands of Palestinians and attacks on civilian infrastructure have devastated homes, hospitals, schools, and places of worship. In 2024 alone, a UN database reported 383 aid workers killed globally. As a taxpayer and a member of the public, I request that the United States government ensure that my tax dollars are not used to support or enable violence against innocent civilians in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Gaza, or Sudan. This resolution matters because it reinforces the principle that human dignity, accountability, and for these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HJ9.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we'll go to virtual testimony from Grady O'Rear, Munza Ansari, and Alex Ortiz. Mr. O'Rear, if you could begin, we'd appreciate it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Please proceed.
Okay. The Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the House Rules and Executive Nominations Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify about House Joint Resolution 9. While this resolution focuses on civilian harm, the larger truth is simple. Violent problem solving, internationally or domestically, must be condemned, especially when it predictably destroys civilian life. Bombing neighborhoods, eliminating medical care, and forcing starvation are not side effects. They are methods of breaking human beings, forms of torture in practice, and they must stop. At the U.S. Capitol, the statue of Jeannette Rankin, the first woman elected to Congress, bears a message our country needs to revive. I cannot vote for war. She voted against U.S. entry into both world wars at great political cost because conscience demanded it. That moral clarity is not naive, it is courageous. President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned Americans about the human cost of militarism. Quote, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed, unquote. When public resources are used to perpetuate mass suffering, it is not only immoral, it is a betrayal of the needs at home and abroad. HJR 9 is also about the rule of law. The UN Charter, the Geneva Conventions, and the Kellogg-Briand Pact reflect bedrock commitments against aggressive war and against atrocities. And under Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, treaties are part of the supreme law of the land. Maryland cannot control federal policy, but Maryland can say we will not normalize, celebrate, or financially support blatantly unlawful violence with horrific civilian consequences politically, militarily, or through public institutions. And Maryland's leaders should work with other states through the National Council of State Legislatures and other channels to build coordinated pressure to rein in federal conduct that enables atrocity crimes and to insist on humanitarian protection and accountability. For these reasons, I respectively urge a favorable report on HJR 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rear. We will now go to, let's see who else is online here. Good afternoon, please proceed.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Musna Ansari. I am here to testify in strong favor of House Joint Resolution 9. I'm the director of the Howard County Muslim Alliance. We're a group dedicated to civically empowering American Muslims in Howard County. Our Muslim faith tradition teaches us that all human life is sacred, regardless of a person's faith, the color of their skin, their ethnicity, or which country they are from. Whether someone resides in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, or Gaza, if they are subjected to oppression, violence, or genocide, their life matters. In chapter 5, verse 32 of the Quran, it says, whoever saves a life, it will be as if they saved all of humanity. Every single life in Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo deserves to be protected, to be preserved, to live, and to flourish. The belief in the sanctity of life is, of course, not limited to our Muslim faith. Countless faith traditions believe in preserving the dignity of each human being. I am sure each of you, as our elected leaders, believes in the sanctity of life. Preserving this sanctity of life is far more grave and vital in the face of genocide, in the face of the loss of innocent life, loss that can and must be stopped. If you do believe in this sanctity, your responsibility as our leaders in the progressive state of Maryland is to stand up for this sanctity of life. Voting in favor of HJ9 is the first step in standing up for each and every single human being in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, and Gaza. This is the bare minimum that each of you as our leaders could and should be doing. I respectfully urge a favorable vote.
Thank you so much for your time. And Do we have any other persons on the virtual? I don't think that we do. Oh,
Hi.
Mr. Ortiz, yes. Please proceed.
Hi, members of the committee. My name is Alex Ortiz, and I'm representing the People's Dignity Movement, a collective of individuals and organizations across Maryland, D.C., Virginia, and the rest of the country, building an anti-war movement in the United States and fighting for the dignity of all peoples, no matter their place of origin. I'm a resident of District 18. I was born in Silver Spring. I graduated from the University of Maryland, and I've spent a majority of my 30 years of existence living within Maryland. I've participated in numerous protests for Palestinian liberation, Sudanese liberation, Congolese liberation, and each time I am struck at the courage, passion, and steadfast determination of all of these peoples, subject to oppression and state-sanctioned violence, who continue to raise their voices for liberation, freedom, and dignity. I also remind myself that I am always learning and to listen with an open mind and an open heart. The bill this committee is considering seeks to condemn violence, genocide, and violations of international law. I think we can all agree that violations of international law are a terrible thing. Just last week, a majority of Maryland's congressional delegation spoke out against the illegal and unconstitutional attacks on Iran. Additionally, over the past few months, elected Maryland officials have spoken out against illegal ICE violence and killings in Minnesota and the U.S. What makes oppression in Gaza, Sudan, and the Congo any different to oppression in these other places? It is essential that we use our voices collectively to unite against violence, no matter if that violence occurs in Maryland, the United States, or in Gaza, Sudan, or the Congo. When we speak up and use our voices and pass legislation like HJ 9 recognizing the genocide in Gaza, we stand on the moral and factual side of human history. Yes, this is only the first step, but we must stand on the side of human dignity, justice, and the equal worth of all human life. We must recognize each and every bit of our individual complicity in these acts of violence and genocide. We cannot look away any longer. The truth always prevails, and for these reasons, I respectfully urge a favorable report on this resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And that is the end of the virtual testimony on HJ 9. And what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to go back to our bill hearings, and we're going to hear HB 36 from Delegate Stewart, and then we'll go back to the resolutions. Delegate Stewart, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the committee's patience. Mr. Chair, members of the Rules Committee, this is House Bill 36. My name is Vaughn Stewart. This bill is very simple. It abolishes the State Senate of Maryland. No, just kidding. I was watching, yeah. Y'all were waiting for it. No, it's equally simple. This bill replaces all of the references to churches in the Code of Maryland with the phrase faith institutions. This bill basically is about inclusion of other faiths, but more importantly, it's about statutory construction to make sure that all the different tax exemptions and benefits that we offer religious organizations apply equally to mosques and synagogues and other faith institutions and not just to churches. I introduced this bill last year. It's passed the Senate unanimously both this year and last year, hoping you guys will do me a solid and pass it out of the Rules Committee this year so I don't have to introduce it anymore. With that, I urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate. It seems like the abolishment of the Senate seems to be a popular topic nowadays. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the delegate? Seeing none.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on HB 36. We will now return to our hearings on the joint resolutions, and now we will go to HJ 4. Delegate Kipke.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. HJ4 it's the first resolution I've introduced in 20 years, and it relates to the failings of the state of Maryland and our responsibility to care for children in foster care. I want to start out by saying how pleased I am to see the sincere efforts to reform the system, both the House Appropriations Committee and the Health Committee and our Speaker have really dove into this issue, and I believe that reform is coming. prior to session. I didn't know how seriously it would be taken, which is why I wanted to make sure all the leaders of the House of Delegates heard about the issue. So I'll dive into that now. You may be aware that an audit recently took place going back several gubernatorial administrations, not picking on anybody, but for decades, the state of Maryland has failed children in foster care. The resolution before you is to reaffirm Maryland's commitment to the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of children under the Social Services Administration. The audit exposed severe safety breakdowns requiring immediate corrective action. Key findings included 7 registered sex offenders living at addresses approved as guardianship homes for 10 children as of August 2024 without the administration's knowledge. An individual convicted of sexual assault of a minor was employed by a group foster care home, later charged with crimes involving children in his care. Another individual working with foster youth had a prior murder conviction, which should have barred employment altogether. Oversight failures place children at risk of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Auditors found 640 children lacked a required medical exam for over a year. 110 children had gone up to 6 years without a medical exam. Over 1,600 children had not received required dental exams, including 140 children who had never had one. These failures represent both a health risk and a violation of basic child welfare standards. Additionally, local offices routinely failed to investigate abuse and neglect, allegations of abuse and neglect in a timely manner. And finally, I'll just say what brought this, I think, to a fever pitch was the very unfortunate death of a young lady in the care of the state of Maryland. I will just say that I appreciate the work that's being done in the policy committees to reform the agency, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to listen to this problem that I believe will soon have improvements made. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we thank you for your resolution and the testimony. We will now go to Delegate Buckle, House Resolution 01.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this is House, I believe it's logged as House Simple Resolution for whatever reason, I'm not sure. House Simple Resolution 1. I'd begin by saying there is one change. We did submit an amendment to reflect that instead of the Department of Health, it should say the Department of Human Services. There was a minor typo in the provision of the bill. The resolution establishes a bipartisan investigative committee in the House of Delegates to investigate potential misconduct by state agencies related to federal funding. The powers of the investigative committee are already prescribed in statute. The legislature, the General Assembly has already convened committees like this in the past, and they are already provided for in terms of what they can do, but not what they are authorized to do in terms of their scope or existence. The powers would include the ability to subpoena witnesses, take testimony under oath, and hold individuals in contempt for failing to comply. There are two things I've learned in my 12 years here in Annapolis. The first is that we are extremely reliant as a state, as many states are, on federal funding. Regardless of who sits in power in Washington, D.C., federal funding decisions have an outsized impact upon our ability to operate state government and provide services that we'd like to provide. And the second thing I've learned is that the executive branch has an extreme advantage over the legislative branch with respect to the oversight that can occur over our administrative agencies and bureaucracies that exist throughout Maryland state government. The legislative investigative committee in this particular case would have authority to look into situations where the Department of Transportation, through a DLS audit, the DLS audit has indicated that about $1.4 billion may exist in accrued unrecovered federal revenue without documentation, and has called into question whether the federal government would require some type of clawback or authorization for those monies. The governor's administration obviously can say that they don't want to do that, and I'm sure that the committees of jurisdiction here in the House of Delegates and the Senate will work very assiduously and in a bipartisan manner to make sure that that doesn't happen. We don't want to lose those funds or have to repay funds back to the federal government for things that we've used in our roads or our other transit systems. But we should be, as a legislature, really having the ability to inquire as to why this happened and how it happened, rather than just take the I'll take care of it sort of approach that we hear from administrations. And as my colleague said earlier, it's not about this administration or the last administration. I think many executive branch and gubernatorial administrations take this position of we're only here for 90 days. We're part-time workers, so to speak, and if you can just sort of keep us out of the newspapers for that period of time, we'll fade away, and by the time we come back in January, the problem will be solved, or another problem will have occurred, or something will have happened, and it will be, if not swept under the table, it will be swept aside from primary concern. And so the goal of the resolution is to create a committee that would be obviously under the control of the Speaker and the Senate President as to the direction of the appointments and how it operates, to give us the authority to look into these types of problems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor? I do not see anyone. Thank you for your time. Your bill. The other joint resolution we have on our agenda is HJ7. Is there anyone here for the sponsor of the bill? Sure, if you would approach, please. And okay. Join us, please. Please go ahead.
All right. For the record, my name is Michael Marino. I'm Chief of Staff to Delegate Nicole Williams, and I'm here testifying in favor of House Joint Resolution Number 7, also known as the Anti-Nuclear Proliferation Resolution, this year titled Back from the Brink Act. The purpose of this resolution is to reduce the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons within the United States and ultimately the world. If we pass this resolution here at the Maryland General Assembly, we are joining 7 state legislative bodies and over 75 municipalities and counties in support of this measure. In the world, there are over 13,000 nuclear weapons. A majority of these deadly weapons are in the possession of the United States and Russia. Being that the United States owns a large portion of the nuclear weapons worldwide, we as Americans have the power to create a difference in the usage possibility of nuclear weapons everywhere. We strongly urge the President of the United States and members of the United States Senate to endorse the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons that would prohibit any form of nuclear activity. This treaty has already been ratified in 73 nations as of January 2024. The United States can and should join many other countries in working towards a safer world for all. For these reasons, myself and my delegate urge this committee to give a favorable report on House Joint Resolution Number 7. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next person, please proceed.
You want to start? Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Darrell Carrington, Carrington Associates LLC, here on behalf of the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. First of all, I'd like to thank Delegate Williams for sponsoring the bill and for Mr. Marino's help and assisting us this year. We have a historic number of co-sponsors, 45, which is the first time we've had that many on this particular bill. I'm going to turn over the mic to Dr. Du Bois, who is the president of the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. I do want to note that this bill has been before you, or I'm sorry, the resolution has been before you for several years. We think that this year, especially what's going on in the world, is a critical time for us to move forward. Thank you very much.
Chair, Vice Chair, delegates, my name is Dr. Gwen Du Bois. HJ resolution urges our government to revise old and foolish policies that risk nuclear war starting in error. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small atom bombs. 200,000 people died horrible deaths by the end of 1945. Today, the bombs are much more powerful, and it would not be 2 weapons. It would likely quickly escalate even a launch in error to a full-scale nuclear war. Cities like Washington, D.C., experts say, might be targeted with 10 to 20 nuclear weapons, the equivalent of a 20-megaton bomb. The fireball reaches 2 miles in every direction, where everything is vaporized. To a radius of 12 miles, in Wheaton, Landover, Largo, buildings collapse and fires spread, most people killed or severely injured. To a radius of 27 miles, Odenton, Columbia, and Edgewater, there's widespread third-degree burns. And if a firestorm develops, many more will die. In D.C., Virginia, Maryland, an estimated 1.6 million dead and 2 million injured. There will be few doctors or nurses, no intact hospitals, no transportation, no electricity, no food distribution system. In the U.S., 200 million dead in one afternoon. Deaths follow from infection, starvation, and radiation sickness. Over the next 2 years, 2 billion people worldwide might starve to death from nuclear winter. Civilization as we know it would end. More weapons and more wars won't protect us. Banning these weapons would, like the UN treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. But the nuclear nations are not yet ready to join. In the U.S., back from the brink can buy us some time. Maryland can add its voice to the demand that our government negotiate with the other 8 nuclear nations and change dangerous domestic policies from the last century, like presidential sole authority, launch on warning, and first use. 80 back from the brink resolutions have passed across the country, 5 in Maryland. 8 passed in state legislative bodies, and current resolutions in Congress have the support of both of our senators and 5 of our representatives. We must each do a part to make sure nuclear war never happens. Delegate, with your vote to pass this resolution, you will have the knowledge that you are doing what you can. We do this for our children and for everything that we love.
Thank you so much.
I'm Dr. Terry Fitzgerald, Vice Chair Holmes, and members of the committee. Thank you for your time. I'm a physician, a member of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, and a grandfather. I urge you to approve HJ 7, a resolution that calls on the federal government to take certain steps to reduce the risk of nuclear war. I do not imagine that I need to convince you that nuclear war would be devastating. Global thermonuclear war between 2 major powers would end civilization as we know it. Dr. Du Bois has given you a few details. There's a whole lot more that could be gorily described. One can argue that the probability of this happening is small, but it is not 0. And non-zero probability over time becomes more probable. The 5 points of the Back from the Brink resolution are common sense steps to reduce the risk of nuclear war without sacrificing any defensive capability. So what does that have to do with you? You are our representatives and spokespeople. We call on you to represent us to the federal government, urging it to take these steps. As Dr. Du Bois mentioned, towns, cities, counties, and other state legislative bodies across the country have taken this stand. You have here the opportunity of leadership, helping to advance this move to reduce the risk of nuclear war. Why now? Because now is the only time that there is. What we do now has an impact for generations to come. Speaking as a physician, I remind you of this principle of public health. We must prevent what we cannot cure. Speaking as a grandparent, I can tell you this. I have looked into the eyes of a 1-year-old child and seen the terror of nuclear war. I plead with you to take this action to prove my vision wrong. Please give a favorable report on HJ 7.
So I'm Dr. Art Milholland, testifying favorable again. With thousands of hydrogen bombs at the ready, these are very dangerous times. And there have been so many close calls, so many close calls. We're lucky to be here alive, even to talk about this. But fortunately, we still have time to do something. Now, Martin Luther King spoke out about this. He said, the choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. The choice is nonviolence or non-existence. Non-existence, that's a very strong word. That's everything we ever wanted and dreamed and did and hoped for and everything we hold dear. We have to do better. We have to do much better. At the federal level, we have 2 senators who are working to reduce the risk of nuclear war. And we have 5 representatives who are also doing that, and they need our support. They need our help. We need to stand behind them and build this culture of opposition to nuclear war and the destruction of human civilization. We can do our part. We can do our part by holding our heads up, raising our voices, and speaking out in support of what is going on at the federal level on behalf of everybody we know and love and people we don't know. We have to vote yes on HJ7. The hour is late, the time is now. Although you're facing numerous wailing sirens of distress, and I've heard many of them today, my God, I feel confident that you're ready to vote favorably on this resolution and take what you can do to help out. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Any questions for this panel? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Joint Resolution 7. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes all of our hearings on House bills and resolutions. And next, we're going to turn to re-referral on bills. We have 17 bills that are on our list for re-referral. What I'm going to do is call out 15 of them for consensus referral, and then I'm going to call out 2 separate bills for a motion and a discussion. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call out bills that I'm going to look for a motion and a second on for re-referrals, and I will call them out as follows. HB 1586, HB 1587, HB 1592, HB 1593, HB 1597, HB 1598, HB 1599, HB 1612, HB 1614, HB 1616, HB 1617, HB 1621, HB 1623, HB 1625, HB 1630. Do I have a motion, please? Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of these being re-referred signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call out 2 bills. And these 2 bills I'm calling out next are HB 1607, HB 1608. Do I have a motion favorable, please? Is there a second? We have a motion and a favorable on HB 1607 and HB 1608. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of HB 1607, HB 1608 signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? We've got, hang on a second here, let me get my sheet. Riley, Grist, Pipke. Okay, I'll go. Shalega. All right, the motion passes. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. The next thing on our list is we're going to be going to look at 2025 recess appointments. And I'm going to, you all have these in front of you. The Caroline County Board of License Commissioners, there's a reappointment there. We have a Chesapeake College Board of Trustees, and there are 3 reappointments on that particular Board of Trustee, and we have a Land Reclamation Committee. Do I have a motion on these reappointments, please? Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on these reappointments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this meeting for today. There will be another meeting for rules and executive nominations. Please stand by. Thank you very much.